And we have a quorum, so we will start. And Laura, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Chung,
He may be muted.
Kenny, are you there? Commissioner Sill,
Here.
Commissioner Koch.
Yes, Kenny is here, sorry.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kenny. Commissioner Koch.
Here.
Chair Ross
Here.
and Vice Chair Wilson will be absent this afternoon.
Great. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody, participants and viewers, to the meeting of the Architecture and Site Control Commission meeting of December 13th. We have just one item on the agenda today, on the regular business agenda, in addition to the usual commission reports and so on. And before we get to that, I will open oral communications and invite anyone who's in attendance to address us on any subject that's on your mind, keeping in mind that your comments for the agenda item should be reserved for that item. We'll also have oral communications, but this is anybody's chance to say whatever's on their mind. And Laura, do we have any hands up?
We do not have any hands up yet.
All right, we'll give it a few seconds. We sort of jumped right in. I don't mean to spring it on anybody. All right, since no one has volunteered, I'll close oral communications and move on to our new business agenda. We have one item, as I mentioned, and that is the architectural review of an application for a new supportive housing multi-unit residential development. It includes 11 units for adults with intellectual or developmental delays and 2 units for program management staff to live on site. The address of the project is 4388 Alpine Road, and the applicants are Jim and Patty Ann White. And Jake Garcia is our staff member handling this application. And Jake, I imagine you have a presentation.
Yes, he does. I just wanted to say that it's a pleasure to have this meeting this afternoon, to have the opportunity to review this unique project that would be something different for the community. So Jake will have the presentation. The town attorney, Cara Silver, is here as well to answer any questions, since this is a different type of application for us. And for anyone in the audience that doesn't know me, I'm Laura Russell, Planning and Building Director. So I'll turn it over to Jake now.
Thank you, Laura.
Great. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Chair. My name is Jake Garcia. I am a consulting assistant planner for the town of Portola Valley, and this presentation is for the project at 4388 Alpine Road, also known as Willow Commons. The item before you tonight is a request for consideration to approve an architectural review, site development permit, and state density bonus request for a new supportive housing multi-unit residential development to include 11 units for adults with intellectual or developmental delays and 2 accessory dwelling units for program management staff to live on site at 4388 Alpine Road. This proposed project is unique as it utilizes multiple state housing laws, which streamline and permit by right approval of certain types of housing development. This includes AB 2162, which is for supportive housing projects. This state law requires ministerial approval of supportive housing projects where 100% of units are affordable to lower income households. California state density bonus law. This law allows for additional density as well as zoning concessions and waivers in return for restricting affordable units. In California state ADU legislation as adopted by the town, this law allows for 2 ADUs to be approved by right for multifamily housing projects. And then the objective standards of the municipal code and general plan for the town of Portola Valley. Since supportive housing is considered a by right use under the state law AB 2162, the town is not permitted to apply any discretionary process to the project, nor is the town permitted to apply subjective design criteria such as traditional design review by the ASCC would consist of. However, the law does permit the town to apply objective written development standards and policies, provided those standards apply to other multifamily development within the same zone. Therefore, the subject property is located in the Administrative Professional Zoning District and the Nathorst Triangle Area Specific Plan and is governed by the objective standards of the Municipal Code and General Plan. I'll start by presenting first the architectural and site development components of this project and conclude with the state density bonus law request to be considered and approved by the ASCC today. So first, the vicinity map. This 53,473 square foot lot is located in the town's Administrative Professional Zoning District in Nathorst Triangle area. It's an interior lot located between an undeveloped lot to the left and an office complex known as Country Offices to the right. The surrounding properties are located within the same zoning district, and the site currently has a one-story office building previously used as an office for Linwood Realty. All the existing site developments are proposed to be removed. And now you'll see the site plan for the project. The applicant is proposing to construct a supportive housing multi-unit residential development, which includes the 11 units for adults with intellectual or developmental delays and 2 accessory dwelling units for program management staff to live on site. The proposed project does comply with the objective written development standards and policies of the Administrative Professional Zoning District. And where the project deviates from these standards, as you'll see in this table, the applicant requests the state density bonus to apply for compliance. And the application of the state density bonus will be discussed a little later in this presentation. The proposed site development also includes a parking lot with 17 parking spaces, willow panel, ornamental landscape screening structures, new fencing, a spa, fire pit, vegetable garden beds, site paths, and central courtyard area. There are 2 bridges proposed to cross the dry gulch in the rear half of the property, allowing pedestrian and vehicle access to the rear of the property. An easement is being proposed on the south side of this property between 4394 Alpine Road, the undeveloped lot, and 4388 Alpine Road to allow for a driveway and entry gate for adequate fire vehicle safety access and turnaround to the rear of the property. A total of 45% of the site is proposed to be landscaped or left natural. We'll go ahead and dive into the way that the 6 buildings make up the project. So it consists of 6 buildings labeled A through F on the project plans. Building A, circled in red and located at the front of the property, is a 2-story support building for the supportive housing development and includes a vocational training coffee shop, tentatively to be called Common Grounds, and common use area for residents and their visitors. Building B, circled in light blue, and it is a 2-story building, which consists of 3 one-bedroom units and 1 attached ADU. Buildings C and D are also are circled in green and are also 2-story buildings. They will include 4 one-bedroom units each. Building E is circled in dark blue and is a single-story detached 2-bedroom ADU. And building F is a single-story multi-purpose building for the residents and supportive housing programs proposed to be located at the rear of the property. Next, I will show you the elevations of these buildings to demonstrate the proposed design. Starting first with building A, this building includes the vocational coffee counter and common spaces for residents. Here's the front and rear elevations. Next is the left and right elevations for that building, building A. And the next slide is the elevations for building B. This is the residential building. This is the residential building with 3 units and 1 attached ADU. This is the front, rear, right, and left elevations. And next is building C and D. These are the residential buildings with 4 units each. They will have the same design as one another, but mirrored. Here's the front, rear, right, and left elevations. And Next is building E. This is the detached 2-bedroom ADU. Here's the front, rear, right, and left elevations. And next is building F. This is the single-story support building at the rear of the property. Here again is the front, rear, right, and left elevations. The proposed materials and colors would be consistent with the town's design guidelines and include exterior wall finishes of cedar wood, vertical siding, stained brown, dark bronze, anodized windows and doors, and a dark bronze metal standing seam roof. All fences and site features are proposed to feature a natural design palette as well. Here's the proposed landscape plans to include a parking lot with 17 parking spaces, willow panel ornamental landscape screening structures, new fencing, a spa, fire pit, vegetable garden, site paths, and a central courtyard as area as described earlier. There are also the 2 bridges proposed to cross a dry gulch in the rear half of the property, allowing pedestrian vehicle access to the rear of the property. You'll also see on this slide here that the proposed tree removal. There are 2 significant valley oak trees proposed in the rear southwest corner of the lot. These are proposed for removal in order to construct the new driveway and fire safety vehicle access and turnaround area. There are also 11 non-significant trees proposed for removal throughout the site. The proposed project consists of 24,190 square feet of new landscaping. The administrative professional zoning district requires a minimum of 40% of the site to consist of natural cover or landscape plantings, and this project proposes 45%. Most plantings are proposed in natural groupings close to the buildings and includes areas to be mulched. A lawn is proposed to be in the center courtyard of the property, and landscaping is proposed to be vegetated with predominantly native plants. The planting list consists of trees, shrubs, perennials, and grasses. The project proposes to utilize 84% of the maximum allowed water allowance. The town's conservation committee has reviewed the project and provided a set of comments to the applicant, which are generally supportive and provide additional recommendations to planting in the public right-of-way. Conservation committee is also available here today to answer any questions should they come up. And the applicant proposes planting in the public right-of-way in between the front property line and town trail and between the town trail and Alpine Road. Any improvements to the public right-of-way will require an encroachment permit issued by the Public Works Department. And the Public Works Director has also reviewed the planting plan and is generally supportive of the right-of-way improvements in this case. Conditions of approval have been included to limit potential impacts to the trail and street. The next slide will, excuse me. The next slide will demonstrate the amount of grading being proposed. The project proposes 965 cubic yards of soil movement subject to site development permit at the ASCC level. This slide demonstrates the proposed exterior lighting. All fixtures are compliant with the municipal code. As you can see, the proposed recessed lighting is located primarily along buildings B, C, and D, and at the entrances of building F. Proposed wall sconces are located at the exterior staircases for buildings A, B, C, and D. And all architectural exterior lighting is proposed relatively interior to the site. There are 13 sconces mounted on 9-foot cedar post. As you can see in that top right corner, a rendering of such. They are to be located throughout the site along pathways and at the front parking lot. Okay, we'll jump into the density bonus request now. So the state density bonus law was adopted to incentivize private developers to build affordable housing to satisfy the town's regional housing needs assessment requirement. The project contains 100% low-income units, not including the manager's units, and therefore under the state density bonus law, it is entitled to 80% density bonus and 4 zoning incentives or concessions, additional waivers of development standards and parking reductions, and the town is required to grant such incentives or concessions unless it finds that the proposed concession or incentive does not result in an identifiable and actual cost reduction. Would cause a specific adverse impact upon public health or safety or the physical environment, or would harm historical property or would be contrary to the law. This proposed project includes a request for a density bonus of 5 additional units, a request for 2 incentives or concessions, which include modification of setbacks for buildings C and D, a waiver or modification of any conflicting open space requirements of the Nathorst Triangle Area Specific Plan, and a request for waiver for increased floor area and building coverage, and a request to eliminate any parking requirements for the 11 supportive housing units to be replaced with paratransit services for the residents. So I'm going to go ahead and describe those each a little bit further in detail so that you can make the findings to approve the density bonus. The base zoning district allows for 6 or less supportive housing units, and state density bonus law provides that a housing project with 100% of the base units affordable at the low and very low income levels, excluding manager units, is entitled to an 80% density bonus. Therefore, the project is entitled to 5 additional density bonus units. The 5 density bonus units in the project are in conformance with the state density bonus law. The same principle was applied to the floor area ratio and building coverage limit for the project, and as demonstrated and highlighted on your screen. The base zoning district allows for a maximum floor area ratio of 13% of the lot size. In this case, that would allow for 6,951 square feet. And pursuant to the state density bonus law, development standards that would physically preclude construction of the units shall be waived. This waiver is approached through an additional 80% of the maximum allowed floor area ratio for an additional 4,231 square feet. This increases the maximum floor area ratio to 12,512 square feet. The project proposes 11,182 square feet. The base zoning district allows for a maximum lot coverage limit of 15% of the lot size. In this case, it is allowed 8,021 square feet. And pursuant to the state density bonus law, the project is entitled to a waiver structured as an additional 80% of the maximum lot coverage limit for an additional 4,231 square feet. This increases the maximum lot coverage limit to 14,438 square feet, and the project proposes 11,764. The base zoning district requires a side yard setback of 20 feet, and the project applicant requests as a concession relief from the side yard setback requirement for buildings C and D. The applicant indicates in their state density bonus proposal that an imposition of the 20-foot setback would obstruct the current placement of buildings C and D in the project. This would either require the elimination of a building or units within those buildings, effectively reducing the overall density of the project and thereby reducing the overall affordable rent gathered by this self-sustaining project, or require that the density and height of the buildings be increased in order to retain 13 residential units in the project. The applicant has demonstrated that alternatives are shown to preclude the financial or physical feasibility of the project, and therefore the concession or reduced setbacks can be granted. The applicant therefore proposes a reduced setback of 9 feet 1 inches for buildings C and D, and as shown on this snippet of the site plan. The subject site is also located in the Nathorst Triangle Plan specific area. The area plan and area plan diagram indicate that the intended project site use is for community service at the front of the property and community park, open space, greenway, and creek at the rear of the property. The applicant requests relief from the land use designations of the Nathorst Triangle Area Plan as a concession of the state density bonus law. The majority of the proposed uses on this portion of the site are consistent with the open space objectives of the Nathorst Triangle Area Plan, specifically and including the bridge, bioretention basins, swings, picnic areas, boulders, trees, raised planter boxes, landscaping, and sidewalks. However, not allowing the housing and the other proposed accessory uses on the rear portion of the lot would once again result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for affordable rents for the project's supportive housing units. Without the ability to construct these uses in the back portion of the site, the staff housing would need to be moved to the front portion of the lot, which would require that the staff units either be built by increasing the height of 2 of the 2-story housing units to 3 stories, or by adding the staff housing to the non-residential buildings. The applicant has demonstrated that these changes would significantly increase costs of the project in the same manner as the 20-foot setback due to the increased complexity of building requirements for those units. And finally, we have parking requirements. Portola Valley Municipal Code 18.60 regulates off-street parking requirements based on use of the site. However, under the state density bonus law, upon the request of the developer, a city shall not require vehicular parking ratio inclusive of parking for persons with a disability and guest. That exceeds the standards set forth in the state density bonus law. In order to qualify for the special parking requirement, a development that is a special needs housing development must have either paratransit service or unobstructed access within a 1/2 mile to a fixed bus route service. The project qualifies for this provision because the development is a supportive housing project and the residents of the development will qualify for and have access to paratransit service provided by Samtrans. The developer's request for these parking standards is in addition to and does not count as an incentive or concession request. And the town may still apply parking standards for the proposed coffee shop component of the project. So Portola Valley Municipal Code 18.60 requires that the establishment for sale and consumption on the premises of alcohol beverages, food, or refreshments, 1 parking space for every 2.5 stools. There is a total of 25 stools associated with the vocational training coffee shop, and therefore 10 parking spaces are required. The project proposes 17 parking spaces, which include 15 standard parking spaces and 2 ADA parking spaces, and is compliant with the off-street parking requirements of the municipal code. The notice of the public meeting of this public meeting has been mailed to all property owners within a 300-foot radius of the site on December 2nd. The applicants also conducted their own extensive public outreach and will detail that within their presentation. And since the publication of the staff report, the ASCC has received 8 additional public comments, generally expressing support for the project. Staff recommends that the ASCC confirm staff's analysis that the project is consistent with applicable objective architectural review and site development criteria, that they provide additional subjective design review input for the applicant's correspondence or consideration, excuse me, and adopt a resolution approving the architectural review, site development permit, and state density bonus requests for the Willow Commons project, subject to the resolution and conditions of approval. And that's the end of my staff presentation. Both the town staff and applicant team are available for any questions by the ASCC. Thank you.
There. Thanks very much, Jake. Before we proceed any further, commissioners, do you have any questions for a staff member, Jake or Kara or Laura?
What were the impermeable surface numbers again on this?
So the administrative professional zoning district doesn't require any impervious surface maximum or minimum requirements, but it is subject to the landscaping minimum requirement of 40%, and it proposes 45%.
Okay.
Al, any questions?
No questions from me.
Kenny, do you have questions? We'll assume that Kenny doesn't have questions or isn't available right at the moment, but if he checks in later with one, that will be no problem. I had one question, but it'll probably be more relevant for the applicant. I'm sure they have a presentation also. I was curious. I didn't see any indication on the site lighting plan of any circuiting or controls for the lights on how and when they would be used. But I anticipate we'll get that from the applicant. And with no questions for staff in front of us, let's go ahead and hear from the applicant. Jim, are you going to be making an application? Would you like to introduce your team?
Thank you. First, let me say thanks to the commissioners for your service to the town. I think we're realizing the significant demands it has on your time. I think we wanted to say a special thanks for the cooperation and the professional experience that we've had with the town staff. we specifically wanted to thank Jake, Laura, and Kara, who have been great to work through on a project like this that is pretty novel. So a little background, my wife, Patty, and I are not developers. We're parents with a cause, and we're also experienced business professionals who have approached this project like a complex project that we might face at work.
Many of you may know that our youngest daughter, Amy, who is now 23 years old, has Down syndrome. Maybe you've even seen her working at either Roberts Market or Alpine Hills. Like many individuals that have Down syndrome, Amy has some strong capabilities that make her an ideal employee for certain roles, but she also has compromised language processing and problem-solving skills. So she's vulnerable and she will always need some level of support. Like all parents who have a child with a disability, we share a fear of not knowing what will happen to her when she outlives us.
Yeah, and so because this is such a significant concern, we have been actively searching for and also researching supportive housing, housing that supports individuals with disabilities since Amy was a junior in high school about 6 years ago. Our search has been quite exhaustive across the country, and I would say sadly, very discouraging. A couple things. We learned that over 2/3 of the individuals with intellectual developmental delays, IDD, in San Mateo live with their parents, many times aging parents. And generally that is not their first choice, but it's their only option. In the last 5 years in San Mateo County, demand has gone up about 25%. That's the number of clients at the Golden Gate Regional Center that supports individuals with disabilities in the San Mateo County. And supply for that area, group homes, has declined 11%. Demand up 25%, supply down 11%. So today, an adult with IDD is told that it'll take about 5 to 6 years to be placed in a home. That placement could be anywhere in the Bay Area, and it's not likely to be something that you're going to be very excited about. And as an example, just a recent opening for 10 spots had over 2,000 applications. So with all these visits, we also learned from these conversations and founders and executive directors of these supportive communities across the country that there really are a number of best practices and some things that are working, which led us to a decision to actually do something and not just hope that this would get solved.
So we're here today to propose a small residential enclave for adults like Amy. These are adults who, like us, will benefit from and who desire to live in a rural community. There'll be adults who are able to function independently, to respond well in predictable environments, and to have the social skills sufficient to live in a peer community, and who will be able to hold a job or volunteer positions for at least 20 hours a week. So you see, it's not for everyone. It will not be equipped to provide the required services for individuals who have mental illness, behavioral, or major medical issues. It will be affordable to anyone that has a typical supportive living services budget with the Golden Gate Regional Center, GGRC, you may have heard it mentioned, and it's a state regional center that supports adults like Amy from the areas of San Mateo to Marin County. A nonprofit organization will run a structured and deliberate admissions process to ensure that there's a good fit both for the community and the individual. And we have intentionally not taken state or federal money so that we're able to allow for this local control. So a moment ago, Jim mentioned that our learnings in talking to other founders and directors of these types of housing projects exposed us to both shortcomings and best practices. There are 3 that are interrelated, and when they're executed well, they are best practice models. When they're done poorly, they lead to the kind of closures that are happening in our area. These three factors are socialization, staffing with quality programming, and financial viability. Socialization is probably the most serious. Social scaffolding assisted by staff and the associated programming and spaces for social engagement are critical for this population so they don't become isolated, leading to depression. And there also must be meaningful engagement with the broader community.
Yeah, and the staffing and quality programming challenges go really hand in hand with the financial viability of one of these supported homes. All across the country, in any business, you're seeing staffing shortages. The crisis is more acute for this population because wages are generally determined by reimbursement rates that are mandated at a state level. So support staff, for example, in Bakersfield, make a similar amount of money as a support staff here on the peninsula. As a result, as we talked about, licensed group homes in our area are relying on multiple fundraisers and significant degree of pro bono or volunteer support in order to remain viable. Others, as we're seeing, are just having to close their doors.
We were thoughtful in addressing these three key factors as we developed the concept, design, and location choice for the Willow Commons project. As Jake mentioned earlier, the project location is 4388 Alpine Road, the former site of Linwood Realty. This location allows for residents to walk to employment opportunities. I've already mentioned that Amy works at Roberts Market and Alpine Hills. The other large employers in the community, such as the Woodside Priory, the Sequoias, and the Portola Valley School District, have all expressed written support in the proposal for this project and an interest in hiring this loyal local labor force. The proximity of these employers is especially important because the residents are unlikely to have driver's licenses, which also gives this project the benefit of not adding to town traffic.
So Willow Commons is going to comprise 13 very small residential units, as you saw Jake overview. 2 are going to be set aside and designated for staff so that we're able to attract and maintain high quality support staffing. 11 units are for the residents, like our daughter Amy and others. And so why 11 residential units? I would say that's the question we got most often when talking to people. And let me explain that. 11 units are the minimum number that will provide for ongoing financial viability of the community. Permanent supportive housing is very different from affordable housing. The services over time, the services cost over time are the dominant cost. So supportive housing has about 80% of its cost, service cost fixed. For example, an executive director, an overnight staff, or a vocational coach costs the same to the project if you have 1, 3, 5, or a dozen residents. So 11 units will cover the operational fixed costs. It will also allow for staffing redundancy and specialization given the scale versus a small group home. 11 is also an important number for the residents so that they will have multiple social options within their community for some of the things that Patty Ann talked about earlier. The units are going to be quite small. 12 of them will be about 500 square feet, and they're unfinished 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom with a kitchen that will rent for about $500 a month. And the 13th unit is a 2 bedroom, 2 bath at 870 square feet. The small size is intentional to address the socialization and support these residents' need. They're big enough that the residents have a space that's all their own, but it's not so large that they will prefer spending all their time there rather than interacting with others in the community. Roughly about 40% of the Willow Commons square footage is the common programming spaces, shared kitchen, dining area, offices, vocational training spaces, which will be a small coffee counter to help residents that are interested in building job skills and which will offer some community engagement. These common spaces are really going to be the heart of the community.
So as you heard from Jake earlier, this project goes through this ministerial approval process. And so it's determined by objective standards. Jim and I recognize that this type of decision-making process wouldn't allow for the opportunity for any subjective opinions to be taken into account. So we made the choice to inform and to seek feedback from the community. Last spring, we started our outreach with the neighbors that surround the property, and we've continued through this fall, ultimately spending over 100 hours talking with roughly 100 Portola Valley residents and employers. We initiated these conversations by literally driving around and placing letters in the mailboxes of those close to the site and sending emails offering to share information with those we heard might have questions or concerns. Then we created a fact sheet calling out and addressing the common questions we heard and added the fact sheet to the project overview that was submitted to the town and added it to the Willow Commons website, which is also public. Our earliest discussions did lead to a significant redesign, and this is the plan that you'll see today. So Jim, I think now you're going to start a rendering so that everyone can see a bit of it. This is a view from Alpine Road. Throughout the design process, we've been very sensitive to building height on Alpine Road and to the potential visibility of the rear buildings. As we switch to an elevated view, you can see the rear buildings now because we're 40 feet in the air. We sited the buildings to save and highlight the mature trees on the property. And as Jake called out earlier, we designated 45% open space for landscaping rather than the 40% that was required. As residents here in this community for 2 decades, we are conscious about creating a quality project with quality materials, respecting the town's design guidelines that stress environmental stewardship and blending in with the natural elements of the property. As you can see, we've used the Portola Valley Town Center as the inspiration for the design. Like all of our neighbors, we chose to live in Portola Valley because of its spacious and rural character, and we feel strongly that that should be preserved.
So that was, you saw a little flyover that gave you a little perspective as Patty Ann was talking through that. This is a big, complicated project that we've been working on, and we couldn't have the whole team on the video panel here, but let me tell you who else is here on this conference from the Willow Commons team. First is our executive director that we hired in July of this year, Brenda Bicecki. She has a long history with Portola Valley. We met her originally at Corte Madera when she was working with Amy there years ago. Most recently, she was running the special education program for San Carlos, and prior to that was the vice principal at MA High School. We've used a team of architects, Carter, as you see on here, and Kevin, his partner, and then ABA. We have Pamela Anderson-Roulet and Daniel Ho. I met Pamela years ago at a Stanford autism conference. She and her team have been working for a long time on design challenges for populations that have disabilities. The landscape architect you've seen before on many previous projects, Bob Cleaver. Design is Lisa Staprins, who you probably see her office on Portola Road and has been a longtime family friend. The general contractor is Rich Tenscher, another longtime Portola Valley resident. Then we have an interesting legal team that has really helped navigate this area that we've used a number of state laws that were designed for a project like this. So John Getz-it, Meyer Nave, one of the top density bonus people in the state, and Chelsea McLean and Kevin Ash with Holland Knight, who've really been one of the top people in the supportive housing law. Really appreciate the teamwork and what's been done. There's many other people that have helped us along the way, but this is the core team. So I'll just try to conclude. Thanks for listening to this. We wanted to give you background on this and why we're doing this. Like all parents, we want what's best for our children. However, as parents of children with disabilities, we don't have the same options that other parents have. We believe that Willow Common answers a critical housing need in our area, and we've taken care to ensure that this small, supportive enclave will respect and reflect the values of Portola Valley. So thank you, and hopefully that was helpful.
Just unmute there. Thank you, Jim. That was very helpful. Great background. I expect we'll have a whole lot of questions about some of the specifics of the design of the project and the physical aspects of it. So I'm wondering if, before we go to questions, if you have, or Carter or anyone has a bit of a presentation for us to head some of those off, or if we should just dive into questions. What would your preference be?
We thought, I talked with Jake, he was covering some of the, the topics that we talked about. And so instead of kind of going over some of that, we thought it would be easier just to answer some questions.
Okay, great. Well, let's get started then. Megan, do you have some you'd like to ask?
Sure. Have you considered changing the wood siding to a non-combustible material? And if so, walk us through that process.
Yeah, Carter, do you want to take that?
We've considered a lot of different materials. At this point, we're doing a acetylated wood. That is fire resistant. It complies with WOE standards. There's an element of wood that seems so Portola Valley, and the essence of the design is growing out of the elements that we love and adore about the town center in Portola Valley, which uses the recycled barrel staves for the exterior wood. This design has matured from pretty humble beginnings, led by some very incredible people, in Patty and Jim. So at this point, we would consider alternative materials, but what we're proposing is an acetylated wood that gives us long-term weather protection. As as part of this development, we're obligating to affordable rents for a 55-year period. So we're trying to make sure that the decisions we make about materials are going to last far beyond that, and continue to be affordable, so that the maintenance would be as little as possible. If you've got suggestions about materials that you think we should consider, because we considered a lot of different wood-like or wood replacement kinds of materials, including porcelain tile, different plastics and composites and metals, and so many of them grow into an animal unto its own, that we reverted back to a wood material that has been chemically altered to be less wood-like, as the right kind of organic response to the needs of this building and the long-term needs of the facility.
Let me just follow up, Megan, if you don't mind if I interrupt. Is the material, one of the brand names of that is Akoya wood? Are you familiar with that?
Akoya is not the brand that we're picking. We're looking at Abodo.
Okay.
It's similar in its chemistry.
Okay. I had noted in a Akoya wood project that I was involved in some years ago that that process doesn't provide any additional or increase its thermal stability or fire resistance. In fact, the acetylated wood tends to burn at a somewhat higher temperature. And I'm just curious if is this application going in through the pre-fire hardening code adoption? Or would it be subject to the codes that are going to be going into effect on January 1st? And how is that siding in terms of the new codes?
I think Laura needs to answer that question.
So this application had a planning application that was received prior to those codes going into effect. So the way it was adopted by the council, this project would be exempt from the new home hardening building codes.
Okay.
So what they have proposed would be compliant, of course, subject to normal plan check, but what they propose would be compliant with the code that they're going to be under because of their
Okay.
application date.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate it. And Megan, with that, I turn it back over to you. Sorry for the interruption.
No, those are all wonderful questions. And then one thing I noticed that there seems to be a lot of lighting, the recessed lighting that underneath the canopies around individual buildings. And what's the rationale behind that, and why the path lighting, it appears, are on really tall stakes instead of like a low to ground path light that we normally would approve. So those are lighting questions.
Sure. Should I, through the chair, should I answer these as she's asked them?
Yeah, please, Carter, just go ahead and
Okay.
answer the questions as they come up.
The lighting, in the overhangs, around, the terrace areas or the porches, is really intended, to, help make those, indoor outdoor spaces for each of those living units, work as a community. We've focused the living unit buildings inward towards each other on purpose, to create, what Patty Ann, calls as the, open door policy, so that, these adults, will kind of live in and out, and feel a relationship to their community. In a lot of ways, all of, each one of those porch elements can look back up, to the main building where the dining hall is, to kind of see what's going on. So the lighting around that is to get people, outdoors, and provide a relationship, between all those residents. The light standards, Megan, that you talked about on the wooden poles, has two reasons. One is to reduce the number of lights, needed on site, but also to provide wayfinding, so that those poles would also be, communication devices, to help people know where they're at, so they're big enough that we can do, signage on those poles, so that people can, find their way, and know where they belong. But, so there was a combination of things. We also felt that there was a rural connection, to, the way that exterior lighting was done at the town center, and so that these are smaller versions, of those lighting, light standards, that again are made out of wood, that have, kind of a rural barn light, as that element. But, the combination of, reducing the numbers, and making them wayfinding devices as well.
Thank you, Carter. Megan, more questions?
Yeah. Just concerning the coffee shop, what would like be the estimated hours of that, and open to the public is what I'm assuming.
Jim, you're probably the best to answer that question.
Sorry, I was stuck on mute. So yeah, in our application, we said, it's about 40 hours a week is what we're estimating. It's kind of just the morning hours, probably 6 days a week. We haven't finalized that, but think of it as like a 6:30 to 12:30 or 1 or something like that. 5 to 6 days a week.
And I couldn't see in the plans, did you consider doing bike parking as well?
It does, and the parking for that was the town standard of a space for every 2.5 seating.
But the bike parking, Megan, we're actually seeing, the biking community as, a significant number of, the potential customers.
Yeah.
Including, the opportunity for, I don't know what they call it, but a tool rack or wrench rack, to be a part of that, is identified in the landscape plan.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. I thought you said car parking. I didn't catch the bike parking. Yeah, totally. So I'm an avid cyclist. I think this is going to be a wonderful place to stop, and very clearly want to have it set up that it's a really nice place to leave your bike. And as I said, we would like to have a bike repair station, handy there.
Great, that's all I have so far, team.
Thank you, Megan. Al.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions just following up on the lighting. What duration do you expect the recessed lighting on? Is that something that's going to be on all the time, or just every evening, or just on demand? And then same question for the lights on the posts.
The lights on the posts, I think, will have hours of operation, and likely would be, controlled by a time clock with an override, for, a shut-off hour, and a dusk, turn on. The lights, at the units, are going to be on demand, controlled by the interior of the unit, and wouldn't have a master clock or a master calendar.
But I would add, in our experience of seeing several dozens of the best operating here, the typical place is completely, dark and in bed by 9:30, 10. This is not it's a kind of up early and down early, kind of.
Yep. Okay. Any thought to having those lights go off automatically if somebody forgets to turn them off after 11 o'clock at night or something?
I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay. Okay, that was really the only thing that I was kind of uncomfortable with. So those are good answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Kenny, are you still with us?
Yes.
Great. Do you have any questions?
Just to follow up on Megan's note about the siding. Just if the applicants would consider seeing this and the applicant's architect would consider seeing this as a design challenge, to set an example for non-combustible materials. It's clear that the applicants haven't tried to sort of squeak by or underneath anything. They happen to be doing so on this combustible exterior materials, and it's clear that that's not purposeful. And understanding the amount of community effort behind these changes and the spirit behind that, the question is just if they're willing to sort of take another look at that.
For sure.
And thank you.
Thanks, Kenny. Anything else? All right, I've got a couple, and they're really just follow-ups because, as usual, so very thoughtful design, and in terms of massing and sight lines and colors and materials choices and all those things, with the exception of the fire hardening question. It's not only is it really clear, but the answers are good ones. I assume that you considered stucco. Were there some specific reasons for staying away from that material?
there isn't any specific reason. It just wasn't, it wasn't part of the, the inspiration, that has gone into this. That there's a metering, that the vertical boards, or the horizontal boards, gives us, to give scale, to the building, that stucco does not.
Sure.
As we look at, alternative materials, we would want to architecturally continue with a finer meter of material. So we're talking about, boards, that are assembled into a wall, rather than what feels like sheet goods, when you plaster a building. There are some other alternatives, that we considered, including, wood-like porcelain tile. But there's some elements to, our expansive clay ground, that gives us some pause, to doing, large patterns, of, very brittle, fireproof materials. So, but we did consider stucco, but it came off the radar because of, the feeling or the sense of, of place that we're trying to make, where this is, kind of feels like it's in the woods.
Sure. Quick follow-up on the recessed downlighting. You mentioned that the downlights are controlled from a unit interior. So are those lights in clusters so for example, the 3 lights outside of one unit would come on with a switch, but not all of the lights?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the concept is that, we've got some lights that are going to be controlled, like around the stairs, that would be, a part of, some group access, control plan. And then there's lights that are, right on the porch, of the individual unit that, needs to have ownership and care, to turn those on and off. To answer kind of, Al's question about, would you consider some override? I think we're probably going to consider all kinds of, safety and economizing technology, to be incorporated into the project, as part of, its, support services goal, that kind of override might be a part of that.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I would add, I think for sure having some lights that are, on the alpine facing side, I think having, obviously controls on those totally makes sense. As we showed in the renderings, and I think, we'll see, is the inner courtyard, we want to figure out, we don't want lights on in the nighttime. So we have to figure out how to manage that, but allow residential control. It's their kind of apartments. But I do believe from a neighbor street access, I actually don't believe that is going to be an issue. But I think even their neighbors aren't, the apartment neighbors aren't going to want lights outside. So I think that's great feedback. We got to figure out how to make it work, but feel like residents are in control.
Mm-hmm.
You can always do that specific lighting control as one of those dials that has like a 60-minute timer. And then, you might have to stand back up and reset it, but you'll never leave it on. And
I like that technology.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Well, and it's more affordable than doing, just
right, some fancy programming thing.
Yeah, exactly.
lighting.
That's a good idea. Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for the applicant or for staff?
I don't.
All right. I will now turn to public comments for this agenda item. And I imagine we have some members of the public who would like to address us. We did receive quite a bit of community input in the form of emails and written correspondence. So if you are one of those folks, be assured that we read your comments. You're also welcome to speak if you like. And Laura, do you have some people with their hands up?
We do. First is Mark Rosen.
Very good. Welcome, Mark.
Yes, hello. I'm a physician at 4370 Alpine Road, and my offices are directly facing the property for the construction site. And I literally look out my window and look right at the construction site. I have single pane windows, and I'm concerned about the length of time for the construction and the noise levels during the time of the construction. And so so what I would appreciate having sound walls, sufficient sound walls put in place so that I can continue practicing. I'm a physician and my practice is quiet and meditative. This would be a profound interference in my practice. I've been here for 17 years in this office and it's been quiet so far. So I'm hoping you can accommodate me.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your comment. I think the way we'll organize this, Laura, depending on how many people would like to speak, do you have sort of a read of that? What we typically do is have an opportunity for applicants and staff to respond to the questions and input that get raised during the public comment period. So if there aren't a large number of people, we'll go ahead and do it that way, as long as somebody's keeping track of the question and can perhaps address it. But if we do have a large number of people, we should probably take the questions as they come up. And what do you think, Laura?
We've got 4 hands up right now.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and hear all the public comments, and then we'll go back to the applicant for their responses if they have some to the issues that get raised. Thank you very much, Mark. Who's next?
Next is David Cardinal.
Welcome, David.
Thanks. First of all, I think it's a great project. I'm excited. It's a great use of space in Portola Valley, and it's a great service to the community from the Whites. I think the coffee shop is great. We have a young friend who has Down syndrome, and being able to work at a coffee shop where she lives has been an amazing thing for her. And we need more local employees. As a town, I think we need to deal with this whole wood thing, because we can pick at it in each project, but we need to figure out, if we don't want to use wood externally, whether this project is grandfathered in or not. What are the options, and are we being practical about getting rid of it? So I think that's a thing for the town in general. But overall, I'm impressed and would love to see this go forward. And if particular neighbors have an issue with lights or whatever, that's obviously a thing. But as a town, I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Laura, who's next?
Karen Askey.
Hello, Karen.
Hello, everyone, and hi, Jim and Patty Ann. I am very, very, very supportive of this project. I've known the White family for a long time, and Amy, and I know of other young adults at this point in time who would be very well suited for this as time allows, that are Portola Valley residents. I think the design is beautiful. I think they've done a really great job fitting in with the Portola, the culture of our community and the scenic corridor of Alpine Road. I really want to see it move forward. So, and I think as far as affordable housing goes, it just hits everything on the head. My only concern is about fire safety. And I know that's been mentioned in terms of some of the building materials, but also building separation. And I'm just wondering if there, and I know there's no legal obligation, but if there's wiggle room. It looks like buildings C and D are very close together. This isn't about the setback. It's more if there was any way to perhaps get a little more space between them, just again, to protect the residents and the community. But I love it. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Laura, back to you. Are there more hands up?
Next is a phone number ending in 7562.
Welcome, 7562.
Good afternoon. My name is Caroline Bertongen. Thank you so
Hello,
much,
Caroline.
Chair. Yes, I know the applicants as well. It's a wonderful project, and I'm going to keep it brief, but I do have concerns about fire safety, and just like Mr. Cardinal, I cannot understand. We have now, what, 5 projects that seem to be exempt from all these combustible materials. And so I hope that the town will make a decision, and I hope that the applicants can tweak it a little bit, or can make sure that there is fire safety, especially for that kind of population. They need, and because it's so hard to get qualified staff, we don't want to put them at a higher risk. I also was hoping that the applicant could submit it to the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Traffic Safety Committee. Like, again, we have 5 projects going on, and we have severe issues that have not been mitigated yet regarding parking and traffic on our roads, especially then the scenic roads. And then lastly, I have a question for the staff to at least, make it consistent. All the other projects that you put on the website show all kinds of communication from the people, and that would be very helpful. We're a community. It should not only be, the people from 300 feet within that project, but this project affects everybody in Portola Valley, and especially we want to make sure everybody is served in this community. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Caroline. Laura, are there more speakers?
Dave Cardinal has his hand up again. Would you like to have him speak again?
Absolutely. Go ahead, David.
I just, a super quick comment. I have no objection to wood at all per se. I just think as a town, we need to figure out whether we can prohibit it economically or not. I'm not complaining about their use of it, just to be clear. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm just guessing that Laura is going to have a response to that when we're done taking public comment, because the town has been working very hard on that question. Are there any other hands up, Laura?
There are no other hands up.
Okay, well, I'll close the public hearing and.
Oh, I'm sorry, wait.
Oh,
There's
okay.
one going up and down. Let's just give it a minute.
All right.
Sometimes in Zoom, it's a little tricky.
Yes.
It looked like it said Greg. If someone named Greg wished to speak, try again to put your hand up. Okay, yeah, let's have Greg next.
Greg, welcome, Greg.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
No, we can hear you.
Right, okay, so it's Greg Franklin from Applewood Lane. And first of all, I want to thank and apologize to Jim and Patty that we haven't responded to their outreach. And that's primarily due to wanting my wife to join me. And unfortunately, she's been out of state for almost 2 months on a ever extending absence dealing with a family healthcare problem. So that's the explanation for not addressing the whites directly about this, but certainly in the context of, the town meetings that we've witnessed and seen this week regarding fire safety. I mean, this has been brought up several times. By the way, this is a very laudable and deserving project, and I think it'd be a fine addition to Portola Valley. And it's clear the whites have done an extraordinarily professional and high quality job of their application and design. And I echo some of the comments made earlier by the public speakers. But I think this project needs to be considered in the context of of the whole of the town. It's not just a one-off development. It's going to be a precedent-setting flagship project for a new era of redevelopment and densification of Portola Valley, resulting from this deluge of housing laws that have been coming out of Sacramento. As I assume some people are aware, the town administration and council has targeted out the Alpine Road corridor, often referred to as the scenic corridor, for a new R3 multifamily zoning district, and has singled out the Nathorst Triangle and lots alongside the Ladera Church for R3 zoning that could result in more than 100 units towards Portola Valley's 153 RENA quota. So the Alpine Road corridor and those two sites between them could accommodate or account for more than 40% of Portola Valley's RENA quota. And in addition to that, the town administration is proposing increased density for those commercial lots alongside this project in the Nathorst Triangle, and also at the Village Square. So my question specifically is whether the architects could comment on the building separation numbers between those buildings. And then the major issue that's been raised multiple times by the community is one relating to insurability of homes in Portola Valley. And unfortunately, we don't have any specific code relating to ideal separation of a property. But 30 foot has been mentioned and is required by the state for very high fire zone districts.
Greg, you seem to be cutting out a bit.
Yeah, well, I think that probably has a lot to do with AT&T. So anyway, the insurability issue, I think, is really needs to be considered, and perhaps beyond this particular committee, because it does affect the whole Portola Valley. And what I'm sort of anticipating here is that while the town council on Wednesday night was not comfortable adopting a petition that was supported by over 550 people who signed that petition within only 10 days regarding this subject, my concern is that at some point, if this project is constructed and goes ahead with the building separations, whatever they are, if they don't meet the requirement that is going to evolve or emerge from standards set by, fire domain experts, that insurance companies will respond by either denying policy coverage or setting premiums at such high levels that no one is going to be able to afford them. And it may even impact the ability of owners in the adjoining properties of the Nathorst Triangle being able to redevelop in accordance with the new state legislation. I guess if you extended this problem further, if insurance companies started revoking insurance because people couldn't obtain home insurance, you could see a day when it would be impossible to get a mortgage on any property in any fire threatened zone. By the way, this is not just a Portola Valley problem. This is a problem for all communities that are fire vulnerable, not only within Portola Valley or the state of California or the whole country, or actually even the world. So, just let me summarize and say, look, this might be a wonderful project, but it just cannot be considered on its own. It has to be considered in the context of a much larger system.
Thank you, Greg, for your comments. Laura, are there any other speakers?
Yes, Judy Murphy.
Hello, Judy. Welcome.
Hi there, thank you. I wanted to raise the issue of parking. I want to start by saying I'm immensely supportive of this project. It's a great project. I have some concerns about whether it will go into our new RENA numbers or whether it goes into our old RENA numbers, because it's such a great project for our new RENA problems. Maybe Laura can tell us about that. But my concerns about parking, partly because I agree this is a very precedent-setting project. It is, and the parking has a major impact on the visual impact of this from Alpine Road. It's a project designed for 11 disabled, probably non-driving adults who will be provided with paratransit, so there'll be a van. So the staff that will be there and a CEO means about 3 or 4 cars would need to park. And yet they planned for 17 parking places. The 10 that are up against the building are quite unobtrusive because they're back pretty far, but the 7 that are along the front come exactly to the lot line. There's no setback at all. This is worse than the fire department parking that we all complained about. And the fire department could tell us, well, if you don't give us every parking place we need, your houses might all burn down. So we were sort of cowed by that. But in this case, there's no buffer. There's not 2 feet of buffer between their property line and where their parking starts. And that seems to me to be really pushing it up against the edge of aesthetically what the town would like to see in an otherwise fabulous project. I know they need visitors for the coffee shop. I would hope they'd actually have more bike parking than they asked for. There's a bump out in the fence there at the northeast side that comes forward. It's not entirely clear to me why the fence needs to be bumped out right there. But if that bump out went away, you could squeeze an additional parking place in there so that you had 11 along the building front. And I'm not going to get into trying to redesign it for you. That's arrogant. I don't want to go there, but I just have concerns about this much parking way up front. And I'm very supportive of the town allowing more use in the right of way there. It's a very wide right of way. So there easily could be shrubs and things that helped you mitigate the visual impact of there. But I know that because this is a by right project, the town doesn't have any right to say you must, but I would really encourage you to try to squeeze at least a little buffer of vegetation on your property there in front of those, and to seriously consider not needing quite that many. Thank you very much. Appreciate.
Thank you, Judy. Laura, any more?
There are no other hands up.
All right. Going, gone. I'll close the public hearing.
I'm sorry, Greg has his hand up again.
Okay, Greg. One last shot, Greg. Make
okay.
it brief, please. Greg, are you?
Greg, did you wish to speak again? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, hi. Maybe my question got masked in the description, but is the architect going to respond to the question about building separation?
The public comment portion is designed to allow people to speak their minds, ask questions, make comments. There's no requirement that anybody respond to any of the public comments, but oftentimes staff and applicants do have responses. So as soon as I close the public hearing, I will invite the applicants and the staff to respond to any of the questions that they feel able to or willing to respond to. Does that answer your question, Greg? I'll assume it does. All right, with that, if there are no other hands up, I'll close the public hearing. And I would invite the applicant and staff if it feels wishes to do so to address any of the comments or questions that have come up. Should we start with the applicant?
Sure. If I can, through the chair, Dave.
Yes, please, Carter, go ahead.
There were some questions. The first question was about construction noise. And we appreciate, Dr. Rosen's, concerns. Construction is not a perfect science, but it's, generally, governed, under the town's, noise ordinance, and will be in full compliance with that. We talked about this as a team, and we also, thought that potentially we would, create a notification list for days, or periods of construction, where those, where noise or vibrations were going to be, we would knowingly know that they would be obnoxious, and let people know that they could work their schedulers around that. As far as the fire safety, I appreciate the neighbors in the town's concern about fire safety. One of the things that the ASCC and the community might not understand is, in deference to single family residential, where there is no requirement for exterior fire sprinklers. Yes. Buildings of this type will be governed under the NFPA 13, which does require that all of the covered areas beyond a certain distance on the exterior of the building that could potentially create a heat grabbing roof covering or deck covering would be fire sprinkler, which is something that I do think goes a long ways to armoring and still being able in this situation to allow our wood siding. The fire separation is kind of an interesting element because the building code requires fire separations, between, 4 areas of buildings based on their building, their building use, and their construction type. And so, in this situation, these buildings are very, very small and don't require any fire separation. Although we did separate them, beyond what the code limits would be, to create fire separation between them. So that even if they were bigger buildings, they wouldn't require fire separation between them. The buildings have been thoughtfully, located, increasing those separations right now would have the impact of pushing our buildings further into, the ditch, riparian, protection zones, that we've had our biologists identify. And it wouldn't make a lot of sense. The fire separations, we have worked in concert with the fire marshal throughout this process, starting, back in early spring, on the arrangements of the buildings, the access paths, the positions, of fire hydrants, and have agreed, to have our fire sprinkler systems, further supported by fire department connections, which would give the fire department the ability to amplify the pressure, to the fire sprinkler systems that are being activated. I think the goal of armoring, and fire protecting, buildings, is of high value. I know the Whites, care enormously about protecting these buildings, and wouldn't want to put anybody at risk. And I don't think that anything about their design puts anybody, at risk. At this point, I think the conversation about insurance, is probably something for a different venue, and not applicable to a design review problem. I can answer any other questions that you guys might have, or any more public questions as well. And Jim and Patty, if you've got other things that you want to add or want other team members to add, I'd welcome that as well.
Thank you,
Well,
Carter.
I think you covered them well. And look, I think we're going through this process as we have over the last several months to continue to seek input to make the best possible project. So we appreciate any feedback. I think our team will take all of that into consideration, from lighting, parking, fire safety, all really good things. Our team did talk specifically as we saw the letter from the two physicians. So I think we're going to try to find cooperative ways to work. You can't replace physics, but I think we can be a very considerate construction project, and that's our intention.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Members of the staff, Laura, do you have anything to add to the responses?
Yes, thank you. In terms of which RENA cycle this project would fall into, our understanding of the law is it would fall into the next RENA cycle, so RENA 6, so it would count towards the 253 units that we're trying to plan for in the next 8-year cycle. If people were not aware of the town council meeting last week related to fire safety, the town council did adopt a new building code home hardening set of amendments that would require non-combustible materials for future projects, but it did specifically exempt those projects that were already in the planning process out of respect for the work and the time that it takes to design those projects. And so new projects that are applying after the implementation date will have to comply with the non-combustible exterior materials. So to the earlier public comments point, this issue has actually been decided now by the council, and we're in the time period of phasing that in over the next couple of weeks. In regards to building separation, someone mentioned the 30-foot distance. The fire marshal has been speaking on this recently in a couple of different public meetings. Most notably, he said that the fire district will be working on comprehensive fire code amendments that would be part of the normal 3-year fire code cycle. So those will be under consideration next year in calendar year 2022. So there's no building separation requirement that's in effect right now for this project. And we don't know if there will be some future building separation requirement. That will depend on what the fire district proposes in the future. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, as we think about some of these compromises about things like parking and having enough spaces and having an appropriate buffer between the project and the right of way. I know that the applicant team will think about if there's any way to buffer that. Just from a staff point of view, I would offer that because of the way the parking is set up under density bonus law, it would be possible, for example, to let them evaluate whether all those parking spaces would be necessary. So if perhaps they were, wanted to build 2 less spaces now or a couple less spaces and evaluate the need for those spaces and potentially add them later, that could be an option. And sometimes that can be designed in a way that they could be flexible. So I just offer that as a suggestion if the ASCC wish to discuss that with any more detail. And so that's what I've got from my notes from the public comments.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And I just wanted to add one kind of administrative item, not really a discussion item, and that is regarding the adoption of building codes. And it is the norm. It almost never happens that once a building code starts being discussed, that it is adopted and applies immediately to every project that is already in progress. Building codes typically have an adoption date, and upon that date, those codes, once they're in effect, apply to projects that come into the pipeline from that point forward. So this is not unusual at all. It applies to building codes, fire codes, every type of code. And it's my understanding that Portola Valley's new fire hardening code is probably the strictest in the country in terms of fire hardening residential structures. So we're really leading the charge here. And I think everybody involved in that process should be proud of it. In any case, with that, I'd like to come back to commissioners for discussion and action. And we may at some point need a little guidance about the nature of our action, but let's start with discussion first and see what commissioners have to say. And Kenny, why don't we start with you in discussion since you were last on questions? If you're still with us.
I
There you are.
apologize. Yeah. I apologize for missing some of the meeting in the beginning. And so my discussion comments will be a little bit limited. And when it comes to a recommendation to approve or not, I'd like to reserve the time to do that until the very end after I hear the other commissioners' comments, in case there's something that I missed that would make me choose to abstain. But on the whole, it seems like taken as a whole, I think it seems like a really beautiful project, not just aesthetically, but in the spirit of what's trying to be achieved here. And I thank the applicants for bringing that to the town. On the combustible materials, I do think that I still think it's worth revisiting, and I apologize if this has been done and I haven't understood it from the comments, but you know, my understanding is that there is a give and take in terms of the sprinkler systems and combustible and non-combustible materials that can make it not clear from a cost perspective. And the reason why I go back to both Dave Cardinal's and what Megan raised and what I already commented on regarding the non-combustible materials, and including the question of insurance, is because the cost was given as a justification for going with wood. And I hear in that an implication that to achieve the feeling that you want out of the space, it's been assumed that you can just get that with wood within a reasonable cost. And the town discussions around this subject really make it clear in terms of what people have said their insurance companies have told them, and from people's actions around town in terms of exterior materials. It's not clear that choosing a less expensive material to begin with is going to be cheaper, not in the long run, but even in a relatively short run, given how these policies change. So with a blanket town policy to use non-combustible materials, it seems worth recommending, based on the experience of the people in the town, that you check with your insurance company whether they're going to require you to change those materials anyway. And I think it is a question for the fire department whether it is a moot point to use non-combustible materials or not, because you have the sprinkler system that you're currently considering. And so we're just, I guess, from my perspective, I'd like to ask for that additional consideration regarding the exterior materials.
Thanks,
But on
Kenny.
the whole, again, beautiful project. Thank you.
Great. Your comments on any other aspect? We'll save some time for you at the end in case, based on other commissioners' discussion, you have some more thoughts. So no problem there.
Yeah. Well, I agree with the comments that bicycle parking is generally mismatched in town relative to the number of bicycles that seem to need to be parked, and it would be, I think it would be to the benefit of the coffee shop to get ahead of that a little bit. And I generally defer to the recommendations of the Conservation Committee. So if there's, to the extent to which I can sort of bump those by mentioning that, I'd like to do so.
Great.
But I'll the next commissioner speak.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Al, do you have some discussion?
I do.
I thought you might.
I guess I'd like to start off and congratulate the project team. I think that It's a very complex project and extremely well thought out. I think that the material choices are attractive, fencing, bridges. And I think the site design is excellent. The landscaping plan is quite good. I really think that this project is quite suitable for the scenic corridor. Just really the whole project plan is very impressive. I think that in terms of recommendations, I would say that the first one is we've already talked about. I think doing whatever you can to minimize the impact of lighting is important, and it sounds like that's kind of already the way you're thinking. You've already heard about the external siding choices and doing what you can there. I realize you got to come up with a project that minimizes cost, and so you're sort of in a box, and so you just have to do the best you can. And the third thing is, I think that the Conservation Committee comments on this project are very appropriate, and I think that they're worth paying attention to as you move forward. But really, I feel like the work that's been done is incredibly high quality by all of the participants of the project team. So I think that officially the ASCC's role is to look at the density bonus of 5 additional units, and I think that that's correct. We're supposed to look at granting requested incentives, and I'm all in favor of that. Granting a waiver for the increased floor area and building coverage, and I'm in favor of that. And eliminating any parking requirement for the 11 supportive housing units, and I'm in favor of that. And I'm quite comfortable approving the resolution that was proposed by the project staff, the town staff.
Great, thank you all. We may come back to you when it's time to make a motion. Megan, your turn.
Great. I'm just so thrilled to see this project and all of the incredible work everyone on this team and the Whites have put into this, and just kind of sentimentally, I'm very proud. So that's excellent. Talking about first the lighting. So if you can reduce some of the lighting under the eaves, the recessed lighting, and do that kind of a dial control with timing, I think that's just a great way. I understand the light poles as being directional, and that makes sense in this community in particular, and having hours of operation on those. So I'm comfortable with that. Secondly, if we go in to talk about the exterior fire sprinklers, I believe that's just underneath an eave, right? Or underneath a decking, is that correct? So it really does not encompass the entire building itself. So when you think about that, if you can find a material that's non-combustible, I think, Carter, this could be a shining moment for you to show the world on Alpine Road how you can build a very fire resistant, resilient, and gorgeous structure. So all encouragement goes there from me. Parking spaces, sure, if you can eliminate some parking or if you can provide some other screening, that's great. And increasing bike parking, I think that would be wonderful. I can see myself going down there on my bike and grabbing a coffee or something. And we have so many bikes here on the weekends. I have at least 10 kids' bikes in my driveway. They're just thrown out. And I know they kind of do that at Roberts. I'm sorry to say, those might be some of my children. But, that is something that's important in our town. And I would love to see that. I can support all the conditions with the density bonus, the land use, relief setbacks, all of that. And I'm really excited to see this come to reality. So.
Great. Thank you, Megan. As usual, it leaves me with not a lot of things to add, but I will reinforce some things that have been said. First of all, it's great to see the culmination of all of this planning and the years of hard work in this really attractive and worthwhile project. There are so many aspects of it that I think are succeed that it's hard to mention them all. one of them that hasn't been mentioned yet, but is the use of the landform itself to really keep the buildings from intruding very much on the scenic corridor. People driving by, riding their bicycles by, are really not going to be affected by a view of a cluster of buildings because they're downhill enough, and the positioning of the common building in front is going to both provide a lot of privacy to the residents and also a lot of protection of the scenic corridor for the rest of the town. So, you know, it's really a successful project in my view in a lot of ways. A few specific things. The quantity of the recessed exterior lighting, I'm not as concerned about the quantity of fixtures as I am of the sort of total potential lumens all at one time. I noticed that there are 48 of those fixtures, each one of them with an output of over 1,000 lumens. And I think in most cases, a single fixture of 1,000 lumens is a lot. If there were, say, the fixtures are in clusters of 3 or something like that, you know, getting a total of 1,500 lumens would probably be enough to, you know, have a pretty good social function in that area with that amount of lighting. And I don't know if it's possible to lamp them down a little bit, and maybe 1,025 is just the sort of maximum capacity of these fixtures, but I'd be surprised if that much lighting is really needed. So would appreciate just looking at that. For me, that's not something for a condition, just a little bit of thinking. I don't have a problem with the pathway lightings. Those actually are at somewhat lower lumens, and there's significantly fewer of them. I like the idea of a kind of an override that turns lights off at some time so that, you know, at midnight, we're not looking out over a sea of light that sort of, you know, when it gets a little foggy in particular, a bunch of lights that are on will really make a very visible spot, a sort of a close encounters experience. And I think it would be great to avoid that. And I know you want to, from having spoken to you all about this. And one of the options for safety purposes, assuming, you know, there are times when somebody might be out after lights out, is the use of motion sensors, which used to be, you know, prohibited in town, but we've come to embrace motion sensors if they're used wisely, with a fairly quick turn off on a timer. If somebody's walking along a path and they get close to a light fixture that's in a strategic spot to help them navigate, I don't have a problem with it coming on. Just remembering that the deer and the mountain lions and everybody else are going to be setting them off too. On the parking spaces, if you can see your way to reducing some, I was just sort of wondering if it might be possible. Well, first of all, I like the idea of what I would call a parking reserve. So an area that's designated for putting in parking if the demand requires it. If you find it, you know, there's a lot of people coming for coffee in the morning that want to stop there, and you have a lot of overflow parking, and you've only built out 12 spaces instead of 17, there would be an area where that could be increased. But if it were possible to, say, put parallel parking along the side of the lot that's at Alpine, then you could create a 5-foot wide landscaping buffer and still have plenty of room to navigate in the parking lot and retain a few spaces along the Alpine Road side. So if it's possible to take a look and get the town to further reduce the parking requirement, I would be all in favor of that. In the absence of that, I would love to see the town do something with that very deep right of way there right now, which is mostly broken up asphalt and gravel. It would be wonderful if the town could participate in that landscape buffer. I know that's not the applicant's concern, but it would go a long way to mitigating the issue here of having the parking right up against the property line. Bicycle parking. In my experience, bicycle riders rarely use the actual rack or the designated parking. But I think that's a great thing. I mean, bicycle riders, Jim, you probably do this too. You'll lean your bike up against the building. Or if it's a good spot, you'll lay it on the ground. I'm not too concerned about providing more bicycle parking because I think bicyclists do what they need to do. And it may look a little cluttered, but it's also kind of organic. And it's also kind of festive. And also being a cyclist, seeing a lot of bicycles around. So I don't see a particular need to increase the amount of bicycle parking, but just to understand that there will be lots of bicycles around during the high coffee periods, you know, Saturday, you know, at the beginning of the Saturday morning ride or something. Fire protection. I think the requirements of NFPA 13 that Carter talked about are really significant and not usually applied to residential, certainly not single family homes. So people in general probably don't have a good understanding of the profound differences between the requirements of multifamily or commercial buildings and single family homes. I would propose that these buildings, even with the separation that they're being granted here and with the requirements of the fire codes, will probably be the safest buildings in town. I don't see a lot of people lining up to tear down their houses or reclad them because they're closer than 30 feet to each other or have wood siding like mine does. I'm not about to tear it off and put on stucco just because it's a smart thing to do. But you know, that said, it is a great idea, and I really applaud the town's effort to create this fire hardening code and to increase the town's fire resistance overall. It's going to be incremental. So we're talking about keeping the existing fire hazard that we have throughout town and not doing anything about it. But for each new project that comes forward, applicants are going to be required to follow a significantly different building code than the ones that has the various codes that have been in effect all these many years. So I don't have a problem with wood siding. I don't think it's a mistake to do it. I'm not concerned about insurance problems. That's the applicant's issue. And I do recognize that first of all, these units will have fire sprinklers on the inside. Any overhangs as defined by NFPA 13, I think is 4 feet, will be sprinklered. But I'd also encourage the applicant to consider exceeding NFPA 13 requirements. I don't think it would be particularly expensive to, for example, if roof overhangs are less than 4 feet and therefore don't require a sprinkler head, it might be a good idea to put one there anyway. And it attached to the existing system, I don't think the incremental cost would be very great. Probably a couple $100 per head, something in that neighborhood. But anyway, something to consider. I think all of the elements on the interior of the project, the choice of materials, the colors, the site work, the landscaping, all of that's really great. And I think the reason you're not hearing about that stuff a lot from us is because we all love it. I certainly do. So I'm very supportive of the density bonus and all of the exceptions that you've been able to apply to make this project feasible. I think it will be a shining example of what other communities could do. And it's the right location for this project. It's a great project, and I'm really looking forward to see it getting built as soon as possible. Kenny or any other commissioners, did you want to add in some other comments now? Megan, you're good?
No other comments from me.
All right. Kenny, how about you?
I can be quick, and I hope I don't offend the chair, but
that would be hard to do.
But people, I know a number of people around the age of my wife and I who are tearing down their siding or tearing off their roofing in order to replace it with non-combustible materials.
That's great.
And I don't know how much the next bit is to be said, because it sounds like Jim is a cyclist. But there are good bike racks, and there are bike racks that aren't useful. And I think most of the lack of bike rack usage has to do with they're not being useful bike racks. And there are lots of situations that don't have to be at the density that you see on for instance, college campuses, where bike racks are useful enough that they get used. It'd be nice to see an example in town.
Fair enough. Anything else? All right. Well, I think with any further guidance from staff that they might feel like we need, I'm open to, but it sounds like we're at about that time when we're ready to make a motion of some kind here. And Laura or Kara, is the nature of the motion that needs to be made significantly different from our usual process?
Just that the motion would be to adopt the resolution that was included in the packet. The resolution includes the findings for the density bonus and the proposed conditions of approval. So instead of just approving the project, you'd be making a motion to adopt the resolution, make those findings.
Very good.
Well, I think I can handle that. That doesn't sound too complicated. How about if I make a motion? I move that we adopt the resolution prepared by the planning staff that is in our packet.
Very good. And are you open to some options for consideration of alternate siding materials with limited review, something like that?
Oh, well, I feel like we can't put conditions on the project team. I mean, all we can do is recommend that they look at things. So I don't think that belongs in the resolution.
I wasn't thinking so much of conditions as options, but maybe those aren't appropriate either. In other words, if they wanted to consider an alternate siding material, that our adoption of the resolution would not preclude that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that I think that certainly is reasonable. Yeah, I think that we could give them the option to change the siding material, to reduce the amount of parking if they would like to, and to reduce the amount of lighting if they would like to.
Okay, I can second that.
All right. Second from Megan. Any other discussion of the motion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Through the chair, can I do a roll
Yes.
call vote since this is a resolution?
Yes, please do.
So we can make it official. Commissioner Koch?
I'm sorry, Laura, just before you do that, can we just have a clarification on the possible substitution for the siding materials? What you may want to do is rephrase that to say that the applicant may substitute the materials for non-combustible materials. But I wouldn't leave it open-ended because the substituted materials may not meet the design
Yep,
objective.
that's a good point, Cara. Thank you. Yeah, why don't we say, give the applicant the option to reduce, to replace the siding material with a more fire-safe choice. And really, I guess, perhaps somebody should take a look at it too.
It fits within the guidelines of the town.
Right.
Right, we're not doing white marble siding.
Exactly, yeah.
Limestone cladding.
Yeah, it would, any
Yeah.
selection that they make would still have to meet all of our objective standards. So it would still
Right.
have to meet the color reflectivity standards and things like that.
Good,
Right.
okay.
Okay, so we have the motion and the second with the kind of clarification on the language for the exterior materials. So we'll go ahead with a roll call vote. Commissioner Koch,
Yes.
Commissioner Chung,
Aye.
Commissioner Sill,
Aye.
Chair Ross.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that passes unanimously, 4-0. One absence, and that's Jane. All right, well, boy, thanks to everybody for their work to pull this all together. Feels like a kind of a milestone has been reached here. And Jim and Patty Ann and Carter, Bob Cleaver, wish the whole team all the luck in the world of getting this thing launched and going.
Again, thank you on behalf of everyone that's been involved with this. We're obviously thrilled and can't wait to get going. I think this is going to be something we look back on in a few years when this is up and running. I think it's really going to be something that it really benefits the town and is something we're going to be proud of. So thank you very much for making it possible and all of the great thoughts and contributions. We'll take those seriously to heart and talk about them with the team.
Great. Okay.
Good
Thanks,
night, everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.
Okay, that concludes item 1 of our agenda. Thankfully, the rest of it's pretty short. Let's move on to commission staff committee reports and recommendations. The first of those being commission reports. Does anybody have anything to report on? Megan?
Yes. So as you know, the Wildfire Preparedness Committee have had quite a few recent meetings, and I also have another one tomorrow with a subcommittee. I'm sure many of you are aware and have been participating and listening and reading the notes, but there was the petition that came through that didn't get passed forward to planning, and then the 30-foot setback. Basically, it was to halt all projects that did not conform to a 30-foot setback until the fire marshal came out with a new code. So neither of those passed. Obviously, there's a lot of incredible ideas, and our community is very concerned, as we should be. It's just the way that things can move forward, and we have to think legally about how the town can actually put in a halt of a project, or without proper code in place, how can we go forward? So people have a lot of ideas. Some people are really enraged about it, and so I'm sure you're hearing this. I'd love to just reflect back and know that we're all in this together. We all want us to be safe. We all want Portola Valley to remain beautiful. We do. We just got to do it in the right order of business. And it's frustrating, town government doesn't move the speed of light, but it has to be done properly. And I think that if we all just entrust in each other and our neighbors and everyone who volunteers and works for the town, that we're going to get this done, and it's going to be a better place. And it's been frustrating, and it's been, I've been yelled at a lot just out in public, and that's wild. And then I'll get a hug the next day, so it's okay. But we're all in this together, and I'm going to be resigning from the committee because I really don't have the extra time when I took this on. And the meetings are much longer and more frequent than I was prepared for. And I just have so many other commitments, and I'm on all these foundations and boards as well. So I just have too many conflicts. But that's my report on the wildfire committee.
Great, thanks. And I just say, first of all, thank you very much for stepping into that role. Second, it seems like the major purpose of an ASCC representative to that meeting has in large part been achieved with the adoption of the new codes. So while I think it's interesting for us to hear about what that committee's working on and talking about, I think the sort of essential connection between the ASCC and that committee has really been achieved. The purpose has been achieved, and the connection may not really require an ASCC member anymore. And I defer to staff on that, but I don't know that we really need to have a representative there for every meeting.
Yeah, so I sent Jeremy, Sharon, Michael, who's the chair, my letter that I can't continue in 2022, and I just don't know where it is at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So we did talk about it a little bit from a staff point of view. And I
Mhm.
think what we probably need to do is confirm the official composition of the committee. And then maybe we can bring it back for ASCC discussion early in the new year to talk about if there's some different way to approach it in terms of how ASCC would participate or rotate members or be involved in some parts but not others. So we just need to think that through. And we'll have to talk about that early in the new year.
And I do think it is important to have folks on this committee that know how the town does function, other than just being a concerned citizen who's very eager and has all these great ideas. And Jeff Alfs, who's on this as well, has been very helpful and explaining, why we can't just say something and make it a law tomorrow. It is important to know the insides and outs. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I've certainly been on the ASCC for 9 years. So I know a decent amount about how the process works. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, and that's of course the other function that the liaison performs, which is to help inform the other members of that committee how the process works. But you don't necessarily get more hugs than yelled at for that. Anyway, thank you for doing it, Megan, and we'll figure it out going forward. Any other commissioner work on issues over the last month or so?
Oh, I guess I can bring up the work on the housing element is moving along. It's very involved, and we get lots of public participation. But Laura's structured things in a very logical way, and we're getting a reasonable amount of training so that we're coming up to speed on a very complex area of law, and gradually moving towards making recommendations in terms of what needs to be rezoned and how we're going to come up with the plan that's going to allow us to meet the 253 units that we're required to from RENA. But there's a lot more work to go, but it's moving forward.
Great. Thank you for that report. Anybody else have anything? Doesn't sound like it. I corresponded with Cheyenne on 848 Portola Road. And the issue being raised there was this is one of the residential properties that is adjacent to the commercial property. And they were looking for permission to put up a privacy fence, a short one, but with a greater opacity than the usual 50%. And of course, the reason they wanted it was for some privacy for their for their own yard. And the fence design is similar to other fences in that little area. And given its location and the purpose of it, I didn't have an objection to that. And I think that's the only thing that I've done on the side in the last month. Kenny, have you reviewed anything? Okay. And Laura, are you aware of anything that Jane's been involved in?
I'm not aware of anything that Jane's been involved in. She's been out of town for a little while.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like that pretty much wraps up the commissioner reports. I'll invite public comment before we close that item. If there's anybody from the public that would like to address us about commissioner reports, now is the time to do it.
Caroline Vertonghen.
Hello, Caroline.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to comment. I've been listening what you have said. And Megan, yes, you've been on the committee or the commission for 9 years, but you have to acknowledge that things have changed. We as residents have seen the changes. We have 3 handbooks that have been changed, where nothing can be passed unless it has to go through the town manager. We've seen other changes where we no longer can communicate with you directly. We constantly have to kind of acquire and ask to make sure that you got our public comments. We're not used to that. And I mean, there's so many more changes that I can list, but I don't want to, I reserve your time and I don't want to take more time than you already spent. We come to you because you are the residents, just like us, you've chosen this place because it's so beautiful and it's a wonderful community, but we don't like the changes. And we would like to go back a little bit, even though the general plan anticipated changes. But that general plan had several items in there that the town has not covered. And that includes wildfire safety, public safety, and I'm talking about traffic, about kid safety in our schools. There's a whole variety. And I want you to understand that we have addressed these issues to town council for over a couple years, if not 10 years. And nothing was being done. And so this is not what our town is about. And so this is probably why you saw the petition, because nothing is being done. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you, Caroline. Laura, are there other commenters?
There are no other hands up.
Great. I'll close public hearing on item 2, commission reports, and we'll move to item 3, staff reports. Laura, what have you got?
In the conversation, I already gave you the update about the building code amendments that were adopted at the last town council meeting. Also at the last town council meeting, there was an urgency ordinance adopted for implementation of SB 9. So this is significant. If you're interested, I do recommend that you take the time to read that staff report. And of course, the Zoom link is available as well if you want to watch it. It was a very lengthy, very good discussion, in my opinion, about important town priorities, many very good resident comments, and then ultimate adoption of the ordinance so that we could put something into effect with the direction to come back and look at some of the provisions of that more closely so that we could think about some of the details and any unintended consequences. So more to come on that. I'll give you more of an update and more information as we move forward, but I wanted to make sure this commission was aware of that.
Thanks. Laura, it's my impression that we're sort of potentially entering a new era where the role of the ASCC is either going to become significantly more limited than it has in the past, or change in some significant ways. Has staff discussed that much? You have thoughts on that? Since we're almost purely a discretionary body and more rules are taking away that discretion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in that the state law has gone in the direction of more ministerial approvals and less discretionary review in the interest of accelerating more housing production. SB 9 would have taken away the ASCC's fundamental role to review single-family homes, new single-family homes, if we had not adopted that ordinance to go into effect. So the discretionary process to review new individual single-family homes that are the typical ones that this body reviews will continue under the ordinance, and then objective standards, as we've been talking about, that apply to the new special SB 9 units. So over time, I think you're right that there will be a continuing trend from the state to decrease discretionary review. In terms of future projects, we'll see what the housing element update process produces. I think there'll be some ministerial projects that will be approved in the future, and then some will remain, have a discretionary component to them. So we'll have to see how some of those things happen, how that rolls out.
Okay. Well, thanks for staying on top of all that and keeping us informed. It's more than most volunteers I know want to try to keep up with on their own. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, it's really been a lot. Yeah, Cara's team and my team, we've been working hard to try to stay up with it and to keep everyone informed. I don't know through the chair if you can see it, but the council member John Richards has his hand up, but it's hard to see on the Zoom.
Yes, and I have to switch screens here to find him, but I'll take your word for it.
Thank you.
So John, please share your thoughts.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was actually going to say, when I put my hand up, just before you started talking about the changes that have come to ASCC, that this really represents the first iteration of that. The first time that the sort of the new revised requirements and responsibilities of ASCC have started to take effect. And I think you did a great job. I mean, we'll have to figure out how this is going to work, obviously, as the subjective drops away and the objective becomes the rule. I'm hoping that we can work it so that there's still a major role to play by the ASCC, and that we can use that resource to keep the town under control.
I don't know if it's my connection or yours, but I sort of lost you there. Oh, great, you're back.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to say was I think it's going to be a bit of an adjustment, but I think we've got some good options coming up. Laura's done a great job of putting together some initial ways of keeping things moving along for the ASCC. So there we go.
Well, I'm sort of wondering, as our authority diminishes, if our advisory role might even become a little bit more ascendant. We've started doing conceptual reviews again, and I think a lot of applicants are interested in fitting into the design guidelines, fitting into the town ethos, even if they're not required to by law. And I'm hoping we can find ways to encourage that and support that, incentivize it, not make it extra burdensome for people, but to still be able to take advantage of us as an advisory body, if nothing else.
Yeah, a lot of years of experience here represented right here. So absolutely, that'll be what we want, the way we want to head if we can, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, anything else from staff or council members or planning commission? Hi, John. Good to see you. All right, Laura, are there any people from the public who would like to comment on this item?
Caroline Vertonghen has her hand up.
Hello again, Caroline.
I think it's a new hand that she has up.
Caroline, go ahead.
Short. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope you will keep your advisory position and even authority, improve your authority, because we trust in you. And it has been working for all these years. We're very disappointed with the town council and staff who have not shown any leadership in promoting what the residents wanted. We have seen examples in Los Altos. We've seen even Menlo Park, who's pushing back. And so we're hoping that that will change. So hopefully you will continue to do your advisory position and perhaps a little more than that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Caroline. Anybody else from the public to comment?
Yeah, Rita Comas Whitney.
Go ahead, Rita. You may be muted. Rita, if you can hear us, there you
Thank
are.
you. My screen's moved, so sorry about that. And it's a new computer, so I had to find the screen. But I just want to thank the ASCC for the work that they do, the primary work that they do to keep our town safe, beautiful, not blaring with lights, all the reasons why I came to this beautiful town. And no matter what happens with SB 9, SB 10, all of these other restrictions are coming from the state, I hope that the town continues to use the guidelines from the ASCC. I know what I had to do to build my house, and I was listened to, and I worked within the constraints of the town. And I just love my home and happy for the choices that working with the town and why I'm in this town. But that was a time, 2009, 2010, when I was coming through all these meetings, and it just seemed to be a different time where residents did have more of a voice in the day-to-day operations of requests. And the petition is an example of a lot of voices. So please, as the state and the federal government puts all these constraints, I hope that the town continues to listen to the voice of the residents, the 4,500 residents, the 1,800, 1,900 homes that are here, because we are the town. And yes, and we've somehow approved and voted through council and people are appointed, but don't forget that you guys are a part of the community too. And we appreciate you having a voice for us, but don't forget our voices. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Rita. Anybody else like to comment?
No, that's it.
All right, I'll close item 3. That was staff reports. And the only remaining item on our agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Are there any corrections? I see a lot of shaking heads. Sounds like no corrections. Before I entertain a motion to adopt the minutes, is there anybody that would like to address us from the public about the minutes?
Caroline Vertonghen.
Hello again, Caroline.
Sorry for this. I have not seen the minutes. The minutes have not been posted since September. Perhaps there's a different organization or will you put them differently, but I have not seen any minutes since September.
I'll let staff answer that. We get a copy of them in our packet. That's how we review them. Laura is.
They're not on the website.
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any problem. Did all the commissioners receive the minutes? I mean, I don't know if we made an administrative error. Were they all in your packets?
They were in my packet.
Yes.
Okay, let me just check to see. I downloaded from the website, so let me look at that. We'll just be clear. Okay, in the packet, I do have the minutes starting on red page 210. So when the minutes are approved, they're moved over to the approved minutes section. And when the minutes are in draft, they're part of the packet for the next meeting. So that's how they're available.
Great. So Caroline, I hope you got that. Until they're approved, the minutes do not get posted to the minutes section of the town calendar, the meetings and so on, but they are available as part of our packet that gets published on the web. So it's just a different place to look to find them. Any other public comments about the minutes? All
There's
right.
no other hands up.
Good. Would someone like to make a motion? Megan, Al?
I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I
Okay,
don't-
then you're not qualified to make a motion.
Yeah.
And in fact, well, I guess there are three of us that were. So Kenny, would you
I'll make
like to,
motion to approve the minutes.
all right. We'll need a second. Kenny, would that be you?
I'll second.
Very good.
Yes.
All those in favor? Aye.
I think I'll abstain.
That's 3 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 absence. And the minutes are adopted and will be moved over to that section of the town's website. Okay, well, thanks everybody for a really thorough job on Willow Commons. It's a significant project. It'll be exciting to see it come to fruition.
I know,
And
I'm excited to see what they're gonna name the cafe. Maybe it'll be Amy's.
Maybe, but I like Common Grounds. I thought that was pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah, I thought that was pretty
clever.
good.
Very clever.
That's the working name that they've given it.
Good.
That's not me. I'm not that creative.
Oh.
So that was pretty good. And I believe we're not meeting again this year. Is that right, Laura?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So I look forward to seeing all of you next year.
Yeah.
And be thinking about, it's our opportunity to reshuffle the hierarchy here, the leadership of equals. So we don't have Jane here with us at the meeting tonight. So that pretty much assures that, we'll put her in a leadership position next year. She's not here to object, but we'll have a chance to talk about it in January.
Great.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you all then.
Yeah. you
Okay,
too.
great. Yep.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Thanks
holidays.
very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
Bye.
Yes, to you too.
Good night.
Good night.